here. I'm back today to do a top 10 Tuesday. The theme this week was kind of difficult, so I won't have 10, but I will have a couple. The theme this week is characters in books that you like, but you didn't like the book or you didn't enjoy the book. So I thought about it. I called my friends and we kind of had a powwow. We didn't come up with 10, but we did come up with a couple. But my friend Sarah and my co-blogger reminded me of a couple characters that I love, but the books just did not wow me. So let's get into it. The first book I'm going to talk about, I've talked about a lot, and that is the first two books in the Mortal Instruments series, City of Bones and City of Ash by Cassandra Clare. I've talked about this a lot. I have a very difficult time with these first two books because I really love Simon as a character, and I felt he was really put through the ringer with the love triangle, and I felt like it was really, really cruel to him as a character. But I did love him in these books, and I thought that he was super sweet, and his whole path to be a vampire was super interesting. If you watch the show, he's already been turned into a vampire, so no spoilers there. But I really did like Simon. I just struggled with the whole Simon, Jace, and Clary thing because, like, I just didn't love it. I wasn't that impressed with it. I always root for the underdogs. But in addition to loving Simon and having issues with that whole romance thing, I also did really like Izzy. I thought Izzy was just a fierce character, and I really liked her. So she was another character that really, like, kept me wanting to read. And Magnus was fascinating. I love Magnus as a character. He's probably one of my favorite warlocks in all of YA literature. But those three characters definitely pushed me to read because I was, like, not as fascinated with the whole Jason Clary thing, but the other characters really kept me engaged and actually got me to book 3, which now I, like, love book 3 and on. But it's because of those characters that I pushed myself to read those two books and got to book 3. So, again, it's definitely slow going for those two books, especially if you're not the biggest fan of love triangles. But I ultimately grew to really love the series, and I'm excited to finally start Lady Midnight. I don't know when that will happen, hopefully soon. But yeah, that's my thoughts on why I was not the biggest fan of City of Bones and City of Ash, but I really did like Simon, Clary, and Magnus. So, there's my thoughts. The next book I'm going to chat about is a book. I think it's the first book that I ever got from Owl Crate, and this is like, I think it's going on like 2 to 3 years ago. It's like right when they started their service, and that's Magnolia by Marcia Headley. I actually met her at New York City Comic Con 2 years ago. But that's the first book. The second book I'm going to chat about. Not my favorite. It was about this girl named Azza, and she had a lot of health problems because she couldn't really, like, she had a lot of breathing problems. But then it was revealed that she was part of this court in the sky, and she was kind of like a bird. And I wasn't a big fan of her as a lead, and the world building was a little bit complicated and convoluted. But she had a best friend named Jason who was on the ground that was trying to save her and really believed that she was, like, alive, and I loved him. But as much as I loved him, and I still want to know what happens to Jason, I really didn't care to read more about Azza because she just didn't connect with me at all as a character. But I did really like Jason, so that's like another one that, like, I would love to know what happened to Jason because I liked him, but I don't know if he's gonna get. I just don't know what happens. But there is a book named Airy, and I might one day read that or try to get it from my library, or if it's ever free on a Kindle, I might grab it. But this was a book series that I just was not connected to the world. I was not connected to most of the characters. The only character I really liked was Jason. So I really didn't like the book, but I did love the character of Jason, so that works with this tag, right? The next series I'm going to talk about is a series that I'm just invested in. I'm in it for the long haul. I've talked about this book every once in a while, but I especially last year when I binge read the entire series, and that's the Hannah Swanson series by Joanne Fuca. Reader that mostly reads young adult books, on young adult fantasy, young adult contemporary, young adult mystery. And I really like strong female characters and young female characters who just kick asses and take names. Hannah is not like that, and Hannah relies a lot on the men in her life, and it's men that I don't like. So, in the last couple of books, I really struggled with Hannah a lot, but that doesn't mean I don't like the books. I love the other characters. I love Norman. I love Lisa, who we don't see enough of, and I love her sister Michelle. Hannah I struggle with a lot, but I do like them. The books are like a good pair of jeans. I definitely like the entire town. I like the dynamics of living in a small town. I love the characters that we meet. Hannah I struggle with sometimes because of the decisions she makes and the focus she puts on the men in her life. But I do like the cast of characters that Hannah is surrounded with, and that keeps me engaged in this long running series. But especially the last couple of books, I became to get a little bit more frustrated with Hannah. And I'm curious to see what happens in the next book because maybe some of my problems will resolve. We don't know, but I have some suspicions that they might. So overall, I struggle with Hannah most of the, especially recently. But I do like the cast of characters like Norman, Michelle, Lisa. I just like those characters. So those definitely keep me reading. The next book I'm going to chat about is a book that I got from New York City Comic Con 2 years ago, and that is The Cruelty by Scott Bertrand. This book was a super action-packed thriller, but I literally had no connection to the main character, like at all. And the plot was very like you would do something for like 20 pages and then you would change your setting. So it was really hard to become emotionally invested in the lead character, but also very hard to become emotionally invested in the situation because it kept changing. There was a character though that I liked, and it was her friend that she met at home that didn't go on the adventure with her, but they were communicating through text and through emails, and I really liked him. I cannot remember his name, but I really liked him, and I thought that he was such a fun part. I would have liked if they would have gone on, and I never say this because I think that girls should be able to go on adventures by themselves, but because she was really unlikable, I would have liked to have someone to balance her out sometimes, and that's why I would have liked him to be on the adventure with her. Kind of controversial, I know, but I really like their dynamics, and if they were actually together, I think I would like that. I have heard that in the Greed, that character plays a little bit of a more important role, so I maybe try to get it on my Kindle or get it from the library and see if I like that book better. Did not like the lead character, did not like the structure of the novel, but I did like the dynamics between her and her friend, so that's why this book also belongs in this list. And I've actually read it last month, and it's The Hazelwood by Melissa Alpert. I did talk about it in my wrap up. This wasn't my favorite book, but I really did like the urban fantasy when they were like searching. I was less impressed with the when we actually went into the Hazelwood, that part of it that did not impress me. And I struggled a little bit with Alice. I think she's a super unlikable character at points, but it becomes really apparent why she's super unlikable towards the end of the novel. But I really did like Ellery, the guy that she was with for like the beginning part of the novel, especially, and I really like their dynamics. And he really kept me reading because I wanted to know what was going to happen to him. And he was like super fascinating, and I'm really curious to know if maybe book 2 in the series follows Ellery. That would actually really intrigue me because I definitely was more connected to Ellery than I was to Alice. But that's just my thoughts about why this is the book I like the most out of this whole entire list. Um, but I just didn't love it as much as I wanted to. But the character of Ellery kept me reading till the very, very end, and I will definitely be checking out book 2 just to see what his role is in, and maybe he's the focus. I don't know. We don't know anything about it. But overall, it gave it like 3.5 stars. And I really did like the copy that I got, so it's definitely being kept on my keep shelf. But I just was not super impressed with I guess like that character of Alice and also the parts that were outside of the real world. So that's my thoughts on the Hazelwood and why I really like the character of Ellery, but struggled with some of elements of the rest of the novel. Were you waiting for this one? You know my thoughts on this series. I'm sure you knew it was going to turn up. If you watched any of my videos, this will not be a shock to anyone, but let's all say it together. Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. You know, I am always on the opposite side of a love triangle. The side that goes with the love triangle, I am always on the other side. So my favorite character in the entire Twilight series was Jacob. I love Jacob so much. I loved him in book 1. I loved him in book 2. We can all admit the end of book 3 I struggled with just a bit, but I really did love Jacob, and Jacob's role in this story is really what kept me reading because I do not like Bella, I do not like Edward, I do not like that romance at all, at all. But I did like Jacob. And I loved Jacob until the last 40 pages or the last 100 pages of Breaking Dawn. So yeah, it's still not my favorite series. I will never reread it ever. But I did like Jacob. So say that with you will. I really did like him as a character. I thought that him and Bella were a much more even match. Yeah, I said it. So what? But yeah, so Jacob is one of the various reasons why I kept reading Twilight because I had to know what happened to him. But then his journey did not end any way I liked it to end or wanted it to end, so that was slightly disappointing. But that's my thoughts on Twilight and Jacob. This is another book that I did like the series overall, and Grace, the lead character, did grow on me, but she was not my favorite character in this series. And I think book one I really struggled with, but I really did like book two and book three. It just was a little bit more predictable than I would have liked, but I definitely loved the cast of characters outside of the lead a little bit more than her, so that's why I included that on this list. And this is All Fall Down by Ellie Carter. Girl, and she is living somewhere, and in this town they're all like parts of an embassy. She's like an American. On this row is like Embassy Row, and you're all these embassies, and there's a bunch of different kids from various embassies. And I really struggled a little bit with Grace a lot of the time, but I really did like Ethan, and I loved all the other cast of characters that we got to meet. They kept me so invested in this story, and I almost wish that we got their perspective sometimes, because I really liked them. I loved Ethan, I loved all the other kids that we got to meet. Thought they were super diverse, and they had less baggage, which Grace had a lot of baggage. I think that's sometimes why I struggled with her. But I really did love the cast of characters that sometimes surrounded her. So that's why I added that book to this list, because they were super compelling to me and kept me reading all three books. But yeah, the lead character was a bit of a struggle, but also like the plot towards the end, because it just was a little bit predictable. I finished a book series like very similar to that recently, so it just became a little bit too predictable for me. But overall, that is why I include All Fall Down by Ally Carter on this list. If you're looking for a really strong series by Ally Carter, I highly recommend the Perfect Scoundrel series, because I love that series. But yeah, that's my thoughts. This will be the last book on this list. I did come up with 8. It's not 10, but that's okay. I did, again, this I struggled with. But the last character I'm going to chat about is Roar from Under the Never Sky by Veronica. I read this book a couple of months ago, or a couple, I think I read it at this point like 2 years ago. It's right around when I read Legend by Mary Lou. And I read it, and the book did not make that big of an impression on me. The characters really did not, but I really remember liking Roar a lot. You got a little bit of Roar in this book, and I was like, ooh, I want to know more about Roar. But the world was not super fascinating. The characters did not capture me, but I remember I really was, ooh, I want to know what happens to Roar next. So it was a while ago. I don't remember much about the book or the characters, but I do remember really liking Roar. So take that for what you will. I was not super invested in anything about the story, but I do remember really being intrigued by the character of Roar. Let me know in the comments what are some books or characters, or some characters that are in, some of your favorite characters that are in books that you did not enjoy. I would love to hear them. You can also tell me in the comments, or go over to my blog and tell me in the comments there, and we'll have a little bit more of a conversation. But I hope you guys are having a great Tuesday, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye!